Hey friends, before we dive into this week's episode, just a heads up. Our podcast talks about suicide, sexual abuse, and other trauma, and some of what you hear may be triggering, so please listen with care. This is The Survivors, real stories, raw conversations, and the truth about what it means to keep going after the hardest things. We're so glad you're here. Let's keep surviving together.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Survivors Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about estrangement, which seems to be a hot topic these days. But, when we're talking about estrangement, what comes to mind for you? Rejection, failure, freedom, or even survival. It can come in many different forms for a lot of us. I know this might be a foreign topic for you, Miss Lisa, but I know that you had mentioned in the past that maybe you had taken a step back from some friendships, maybe?
Absolutely.
So
yeah. I mean, I can't
falls into that realm.
Yeah. I mean, actually, we believe it or not, have had some issues with estrangement from family members. It doesn't exist anymore, which is wonderful. So it kind of came back around. There was a period of time where we were not as connected to some family for some very specific reasons, but that's actually resolved in a beautiful way. And for me, I haven't had the same experience that you've had, but I have absolutely had issues with friendships that, for whatever reason, turned out to not be healthy relationships, maybe for me, or had to step away. And it's hard. It's really hard. We talk a lot about loss on this podcast, a lot about grief, and most of it relates to losing somebody we love and care about. We don't talk a lot about how painful it is when that person's still around and you've lost that relationship, and you have kind of cornered the market in that area because of how big your family is and because of the family dynamics. I want you to kind of take this conversation in the direction that you want to take it in, because you have got a lot of background worth sharing on this and ways that you've navigated it, because it's hard.
It is incredibly hard. Having lost 5 brothers to suicide, my dad to cancer, I have to say that it is harder to grieve a living person than a dead person, especially in the terms of suicide, because they made that choice, and the ending is death. Whereas estrangement is either a personal decision for yourself or for your family member. They made that decision. But I have to say that my family has gone about it in an incredibly cruel way, in that there was, I've gone through periods of time in my life where I have been estranged from family members. I did the hard work. I showed up. I apologized and said, what can we do to make this better? And we worked through that. So let me back step a little bit. I come from the FLDS family, synonymous with Warren Jeffs, cult leader. I have
break down that acronym for people who don't know. FLDS, tell them what that is.
Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. And that is a polygamous cult in Utah. And I had 3 moms growing up. I have over 125 aunts and uncles, because my parents come from extremely large families. I myself have 19 siblings. There's 20 of us all together. Obviously, 5 are dead. Estranged from, I think 5 of them. Some of them are still in the FLDS cult, so there hasn't been any contact for a number of years. And then, we had a massive amount of death between 2022 and just last year in March was the most recent one. And I thought that through all of that, our family could put aside our bullshit and really come together, but it didn't stop. The toxic family cycles continued. And what really, I guess, sealed the coffin for my family was, when you and I partnershiped on this podcast and you invited me to join you as co-host, and I decided to come out publicly with my story for the very first time. even before the podcast had aired, its first official episode, ours together, that's when my family completely cut me off. I was talking to my one sister daily, and I hadn't heard from her at all. From the moment that the clips of our podcast started dropping, my entire family cut me off, except for one brother, but we have since become estranged. And so a lot of people feel like estrangement it happens easily, and it's just an instant knee-jerk reaction of one thing. But it's really, especially when it comes from a child and a parent-child dynamic, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. It's because we're hardwired to want and need a relationship with our parents. But when you come to realize they're never going to change, and that can be siblings, parents too, where they're not going to change, and that toxic family cycle is going to continue. And when it becomes a detriment to me, for example, I had to choose, even though they cut off contact, I realized it would no longer serve me to continue to beg for those relationships. And so, in my opinion, the trash took itself out.
Well, look, you know what? I mean, parents, first of all, let me back up. When we think of families, we just have this natural assumption that families are not supposed to fall apart. They're just not. Like, that's your safe space. That's your unit. Those are your people, your team, your safe place. And on top of that, parents are not supposed to lose relationships with their children. You just don't think of it that way. You think that, in terms of the parent-child dynamic, especially when a parent is parenting a younger child, that the child's not fully developed yet. We have to anticipate that there's going to be pushback, and there's going to be stress, and there's going to be drama, and there's going to be tension at times. And I think we go into parenthood understanding and knowing that, it's not all perfect. It's not going to be what you necessarily expect it to be, but that doesn't mean you cut and run and abandon your child. And then when your relationship changes as your kids get older, still you don't leave your child, unless, I would imagine, the circumstances are so extreme that they're life-threatening, or they're, in some way so toxic that you as a parent can't sustain that relationship. But but kids aren't supposed to stop speaking to their parents either. So there's this whole understanding that we all have, that we're just supposed to be able to walk through it, and siblings aren't supposed to be estranged from each other. And yeah, that's what society tells us, but the reality is that is not always the case. It's just not.
And it's not. There's always two sides to every story. And ending a relationship with somebody because it's either deemed emotionally, psychologically, or physically unsafe, and it's usually after repeated attempts to reconcile have failed. And in my case, that is truly, I was tired of begging for the scraps and tired of being treated like I was never good enough. But what really hurt, especially with my siblings, because I did speak about the abuse that I endured at the hands of my mom, and my being sexually abused by my older brother. And, my siblings were physically abused by my mom as well. And they stayed silent on it. And that's their choice. That's fine. But it was really heartbreaking and a big betrayal for me to realize that they could not support me in my decision to speak publicly about it. There was never any malice behind it. It was something that I had carried and had kept quiet about for 40 years. Well, 25 from the time I really, had started having the flashbacks, but I just couldn't continue to betray myself and stay loyal to a toxic family cycle that had claimed 5 of my brothers.
And you shouldn't have. And that's such a huge act of self-care on your part and self-love on your part. It's an incredibly hard and an incredibly brave thing to do, to separate yourself from the people who are supposed to be in your corner and supporting you and going through life with you, but you have to prioritize yourself. Like your siblings who aren't talking, who aren't publicly acknowledging that or supporting your right to do that. Yeah, that's also, I suppose that's their right as well to handle it the way they want to handle it, but you shouldn't be faulted for taking your story and doing whatever you feel you need to do with that story to help you heal. Because I know you, and I've talked about this so many times, that being estranged the way that you are can be incredibly, incredibly isolating and lonely. And it's just compounded by the fact that you sharing your story has made it even more isolating and lonely. And I'm just sorry for your sake and for all the other people out there who are doing something similar to you by talking about whatever it is that happened to them in their lives and just kind of sharing your truth, owning your truth, whatever you want to call it. And you're losing things and losing people because of that. You, like you said, you're not doing this with malice or ill intent or trying to reach out and hurt someone or ruin someone's life or reputation. There should be an understanding that these things really happened to you, and this is the life you had to endure. And you, at the very least, reserve the right to be able to do with your story what you need to do with your story for your own peace of mind and to heal your own heart.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is the bottom line.
Yep, exactly. And those of us that, I had chosen previously in the past myself to step away after years of trying to explain myself, set boundaries, I'd forgive, reconnect, explain away their behavior. Oh, they experienced this. This is what I can't tell you how many years I wasted explaining away their behavior. And it was like, I was going through stuff too, and I didn't treat you that way.
Mm.
So why did I continue to give them the benefit of the doubt? It was no longer serving a purpose other than just continuing to excuse shitty behavior.
Yeah, and we can't excuse shitty behavior. That's all that means. And it's unfortunate when people feel like they need to avoid the truth or ignore the truth or not allow someone to own their own. It just perpetuates a whole toxic cycle, and it's what leads to these breakdowns in families. Like, at the very least, you deserved the support of, hey, this is what happened to me. I'm telling the truth. I'm sharing my history, my lived experience. And at the very least, your family should have supported that, because it's unfortunate that optics takes over in that case for so many people, where they're now embarrassed because something that wasn't positive about their family came out. And now whatever image somebody's family was trying to maintain has been changed. And now all of a sudden your mother probably feels like you betrayed her, that you don't respect her role as your mother. But the reality is, where was she when you were being abused? Where was she when you were dealing with the trauma of being sexually abused by your brother and got no support? Where were you? Where was she when you were making the attempts on your own life or trying to navigate all of your brother's suicides? You can't have it both ways. You can't just expect everybody to preserve your image and ignore their truth. And that's what happened in your case with your family. And it's unfortunate, because if your mother had been more willing to own and accept what had happened, then there would have been a pathway for you to work.
Right, because there's accountability. And
right.
That's just not something that she's actually even capable of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that. And so it comes down to recognizing that she will never change and saying, okay, she's not going to change. What can I do about that? And that is recognizing that it is no longer healthy for me to continue to have a relationship with this person. And just because they're family, hopefully we're moving in a direction that just because they're family does not mean that you have to forgive them, does not mean that they are required, that they get unlimited access to you or to your children.
Mm-hmm.
And because not only did she lose a relationship with me, but she's losing a relationship with her grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the saddest part, is that facing the truth, or actually her walking away and saying, I don't want anything to do with you anymore, was easier for her than to be accountable for her actions and work on a relationship and then have a relationship with her grandchildren. It's
Mm-hmm.
easier for her to just walk away and say, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, because that's what had happened in the past, is I would make a mistake or whatever, and I would come to her and apologize. I cannot tell you how many times my mom and I got in fights over the years. The longest time we did go without speaking, I believe, was 4 years prior.
Okay. Yeah.
And so right now we're about at the 9-month mark. And I actually was in Utah a few weeks ago, and a lot of my friends here were like, oh, are you going to see your family? And I didn't intend to see anyone in my family. I did, however, see one of my brothers. We went out to dinner and, had a good conversation and explained a few things to him. And he tried to say something along the lines of, yeah, we're family. We love each other unconditionally. I said, no, not in our case.
Hey, it's Lisa Sugarman, co-host of The Survivors and founder of the Help Hub. If you're listening right now and you're not okay, if you're feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or like you're carrying more than you can handle, please know you don't have to go through it alone. You can call or text 988 or chat online at 988lifeline.org to connect with trained counselors like me who are there to listen and support you in the moment. Reaching out is a brave first step, and you owe it to yourself. Because your life matters, your story matters, and help is always just 3 numbers away. Mm-hmm.
We do not know what it's like to be loved unconditionally. We have never, none of the children in our family have experienced unconditional love. And that is why there are 5 of us that have taken their lives.
Yeah.
And the vast majority, if not all of the rest of us, have either attempted or contemplated taking our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's when I have extended family members that reach out to me and they want to know, all I can say, as I say, if you really want to question the validity of what we endured in our home, why are 5 of my brothers dead?
Mm-hmm.
That's the only answer you need to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, in the case of your family and that statistic, I've never, in all the work I've done in this space, in the suicide awareness and prevention space, and as a survivor myself, I have never encountered anyone who has lost that many. And I know you haven't either, who's lost that many people from one family. And clearly, when you put that truth, that fact, together with the fact that, like we talked about earlier, you were born into the FLDS polygamy cult that is highly, highly toxic, highly extremist and rigid and suffocating in so many ways and abusive in so many ways, you didn't have a chance. You didn't have a chance. I mean, that is what you were born into, and had your parents. So I know that in your story, your parents your family got excommunicated because your grandfather was he was the prophet. He was the guy. And then your uncle Warren Jeffs took over and kind of superseded all of his siblings and just kind of took it from your grandfather and then excommunicated your dad. So, I mean, and I guess that was a good thing because you got out at least, but that doesn't change, the decades of dysfunction that happened.
And
beforehand.
The generations.
Right.
That is the generational trauma is really what it speaks to. And, there's so many people out there that, it doesn't have to be like this huge thing, of, oh my gosh, my childhood was so bad. It just, even if you just felt like, you know what, I didn't get the support that I needed growing up
Mhm.
because there wasn't the emotional literacy or whatever. If you feel like your childhood was robbed in some way and your parent or family member lacks the ability, either intentionally or unintentionally, to be accountable for the ways that they hurt you, and you feel like, I'm tired of begging for breadcrumbs, it's okay for you to go, you know what, I either need to limit my exposure to this person
Mhm.
or cut off altogether. And that never ever comes with an easy decision.
No.
It is so, there's a lot of grief that comes with that, some guilt, shame that comes along with that decision because it's never easy.
No, it's not.
But
But it's like what you and I talk about so often on the pod is that we can't, and I'm not just talking about in the context of estrangement, I'm talking about just in life in general with people, is that we absolutely can't count for what other people say or do. We can't control it. We can't control their responses. The only thing that we can control is how we respond to it and that's what you're saying. It's how we react to it. And we all reserve the right. And I think that's the essence of this conversation is, or the message that you and I are trying to send within this conversation is that if you're out here and you're listening to us and you're estranged from a friendship or estranged from a family member or from some important relationship in your life, and you feel like you've had to do that, you've had to do exactly what Natasha just said, which is to pull out, pull away, limit your time. There comes a point in time where you hit a crossroads where you're either thinking about them and doing whatever you need to do to appease, please, satisfy that person or those people, or you're prioritizing yourself. And every single one of us, whether it's easy or not, and it's not easy, we all reserve the right to think about ourselves, to prioritize ourselves, to care for ourselves. Because look, at the end of the day, we can't pick our family, period. We can't. We have chosen family. You and I have become chosen family, but you can't pick the ones that you start off with. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, we don't hit the lottery in that way. And it's sad and and it sucks. And like you said, there's a lot of loss involved, a lot.
yeah. And I just want to tell people out there, if you feel like you're alone in this journey, you're not. Actually, a recent survey that was conducted last year said that 38% of adults, American adults, are estranged from at least one family member.
Really?
Hmm.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. And I think sometimes people also assume that maybe it's easy. And you kind of alluded to this a little while ago, that it's like a simple, easy decision, like, oh, separate and just move forward in your life. But when you make that decision, it's so complicated. It has to be. I mean, I know I haven't done it with family per se, but I've definitely done it with friends. And yeah, okay, the act of doing that may be an act of self-preservation, which is important, which you should honor. But there's a lot that comes along with that decision. And, there are definitely two sides usually to those circumstances. But, at the end of all of it, you have to be able to prioritize yourself and your well-being, because for you and your situation, had you stayed connected and you didn't follow your own heart and start talking about the thing that you knew that you needed to start talking about in order to work on your own healing, if you hadn't done that, imagine where you would be, where you could be right now with all of that still living inside you, all that toxicity. And I think it's a hard decision, but I think anybody who makes that decision to put themselves first is making the right decision.
Hmm.
In that
Absolutely.
you have to, because nobody else is going to do that for you. And certainly if your family's the one that's the problem and they're not the ones doing that, they should be looking out for you. And when they're not looking out for you, who's left? You.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
I think about oftentimes where maybe there's some people out there who are like, is it, or they question whether or not they should. I have to tell you, you have to look or even realize, how do you feel when you're about to hang out with your family or whoever it is you might be estranged with or contemplating estrangement? How do you feel beforehand and how do you feel afterwards?
Hmm.
If you are wrought with anxiety, it just all these different feelings of just upsets or whatever, you don't feel good going into it. And then afterwards, you're completely emotionally drained. You feel bad about yourself. That's not a healthy relationship,
No,
whether
and
they're
that's
family or not.
I'm really glad that you said that because that's an important part of all of this. It's dialing into how does this relationship really make me feel? And a lot of it, I would imagine, it requires a lot of like brutal honesty with yourself about like, wow, I can't be around these people. I don't feel supported around these people. I feel worse about myself when I'm engaging with these people. And that's got to be that's why there's so much grief attached to this. It's not just the grief of losing those people and of losing that relationship, but it's also of recognizing that the people who you thought should have your back and care about you the most aren't
Right.
caring about you and don't have your back. And that's hard. That's hard and that's really painful.
And it's lonely too.
Mhm.
That's a lot of why people maybe continue to stick it out because they don't want to be alone
Mhm.
and, miss out on the family parties and things like that. And that is hard. I'm not going to lie. Every single holiday is really hard because I
Mhm.
know that my family is getting together, they're celebrating, and I miss what used to be,
Mhm.
what that used to look like. But y- y- I have to say, being on the other side of it and really detaching myself, and I know that I had because in going back to Utah, I didn't feel that emotional draw, or I truly have emotionally disconnected from my family.
Mhm.
I mean, I went and had drinks with a very dear family friend. She's known my family for longer than I've been alive, and I realized in that conversation that I had truly emotionally disconnected with my family, and it was incredibly freeing to know that there wasn't that umbilical cord attachment.
Mhm.
And so there is hope on the other side of it. There is some liberation, some freedom, some finding yourself and feeling like you can be yourself and know who you are without that negative pull in your life. So I just want to say that if you do feel like you're considering it, maybe just take a few weeks or a month and away from whoever it is and see how you feel.
Mhm.
Start with small chunks. I have to say that so I didn't have any I was not aware of anything that was going on with my family for a number of months. And then again, family friend called, we were catching up. She's very close with my family still, and she unloaded all this shit that had been going on with my family in the last few months, and it railroaded me.
Really?
It was literally like somebody dumped a dump truck of shit on me. I felt gross, I felt icky, I I hated it. It completely emotionally drained me for days.
Really?
Yep.
Hmm. Now, tell me why. What about it? Was it just was it hearing about them? Was it hearing about what was going on with them?
It was a lot of negative going on with them, and I did it was more or less, I guess, like, what am I supposed to do with this information? Am I expected to reach out to them and offer my support, which I didn't feel like I should have to.
Mhm.
It was really just it was a sadness and that, yeah, one of my siblings was actually really close to death.
Mhm.
And so there was talk of whether or not I would, with my husband, whether or not I would attend the funeral. And I had decided that I'm done attending any more family funerals,
Mhm.
for my family at least.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so I thought back, in all those months where I didn't know what was going on, and even years prior where I had gone 4 or 5 years without having contact with the majority of my family. And I think about those periods of times. How did I feel internally? I felt so much better
Well,
about myself. Was more confident in myself, about my ability to be a mother. I just felt better emotionally, psychologically, as a human being without my family in my life.
Well, and I think that is the perfect message to send in this conversation, because what we're talking about is something really, really hard. It's one thing if the decision's made for you and you're on kind of the receiving end of someone breaking from you, estranging from you. But we're talking, I think, more about ourselves being the ones to make that decision. And it's really hard. It's really, really hard and painful. And did I do the right thing? And look at what I'm giving up. But what you just said about the way that you were feeling and recognizing, like, I can acknowledge the fact that it's painful and it's hard, and I probably, have nostalgia for certain things and miss certain things. But at the end of the day, I feel better in general. I feel better about myself and about my life. And I feel that strength. There's the answer. There's the answer. When you're sitting there saying something like that after hearing about your family or being with your family, then you've made the right decision. You just have to accept the fact that with a decision that might be the right one for you, there are lots of different angles of that decision. There are parts of it that you wish you didn't have to deal with, but overall, that's what you need to be doing for your own peace of mind. So you do it. And then it's the right decision to make.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, I'd love this conversation because I feel like there are so many people out there right now, like you said when we started talking about how just the whole concept of estrangement has become such a mainstream topic. If there's somebody listening right now who is like carrying the weight of estrangement, maybe they are already estranged, or they're contemplating it and feel like they might need to do that for themselves, whether they're the one who stepped away or whether they're the one who's kind of left behind, what would you want them to hear right now that you think would be the most helpful for them in that moment?
Oh, well, I actually wrote a poem.
Oh.
Several months ago.
You're trying to find it on your phone?
All right. We've gotten no contact before, but this time feels different. There wasn't a huge fight, no bitter words, no slammed doors. Just a quiet distancing that finally let me see them for who they truly are. People who will never change, who feel safer repeating the same toxic cycles. Even though we share blood, they become strangers to me. So I'll close the door softly and move forward with my life towards something greater. Without the weight of generational trauma, I can finally become who I was meant to be and fully step into my purpose.
Well, if that isn't the most appropriate thing to say to answer that question, then I don't know what there is to say. Thank you for sharing that. That was, I think, the thing that most people in that situation would really need to hear. So take it to heart, friends. And like we always say, if something resonated with you, if some part of our conversation, something I said or something Natasha said resonated with you, you want to share your own experience with us because maybe you've been estranged and you've been where Natasha is and you want to share your own experience, we are here for it. We want to hear from you. We would love to kind of help you navigate that in whatever way we can from the benefit of our own experience. So give us a shout, let us know. And in the meantime, just take care of yourself. Take care of yourself, prioritize yourself. That's what this whole conversation boils down to. And keep surviving. We'll be back next week. We'll see you then.
Talk to you soon. Thanks so much for listening and for being part of the survivors community. No matter where you are in your story, you're not alone and you're definitely not broken. Healing takes time and it looks different for everyone. The fact that you're still here and still trying means you're already doing the hard work. If something in today's conversation resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. That's how we keep these conversations going and remind each other that there's always hope.
And if you or someone you know is struggling, please remember, help is always out there. You can call or text 988 anytime to reach a trained crisis counselor like me. And for more mental health resources, tools, treatment options, and content to support your mental health, visit thehelphub.co. We're so grateful you're part of the Survivors family, and we'll be back next week with another honest conversation about life after the hardest things. Until then, take care of yourself and your people, and keep surviving.